Aloha everyone, my name is Liza and I am the campaign manager for the Flavors for Kids Hawaii campaign. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Talk Story with Our Champions. We really want to answer your questions and give you more information about where we are in the fight against flavored tobacco. We should go for about an hour, and to let you know, we will be talking with Senator Baker, who is the chair of Commerce, Consumer Protection, and Health, and Rep. Matayoshi, who's a member of the House Finance Committee, and who both filed bills in relationship to the youth vaping epidemic. So welcome to all of you. And today we're going to go over, we just did a quick introduction, and then we'll be talking just briefly. I know that many of you are already familiar with the youth vaping issues in Hawaii. We'll talk quickly about the bills that were filed to address this issue, what happened to those bills, what committees they went through, did they pass those committees, what is happening in the state legislature right now. I know that many of you have those questions. We saw the state legislature get suspended back in March, and then it came back again for a few weeks, and then it might come back again in June. Very special circumstances, and so I think we all have a lot of questions there. Then we'll be talking a little bit about what does the future look like for these bills? Do we have a chance to move them forward, given that so many things have shifted over this time? And if we can do that, then what does the campaign look like? We will be taking your questions at the end. This webinar is being recorded. Please use the question and answer box to ask your questions. We will be collecting those and try to answer them and give them to the right person at the end in those last 15 minutes. If we're not able to answer your question, then we will try to address them in the follow-up email with a recording of this webinar. We'll put those answers. Just so you know, this is our third webinar since I believe since the legislature was suspended back in March, since we've all been safer at home. And we try to be responsive to what you want and the information that you need. So if you have other things that you would like covered that have not been covered in these webinars so far, please let me know. The information will be at the end of the webinar, but you can also always go to our website at flavorsofkidshi.org and email us. Let us know that there's some other information that you like. We want to be here to serve you. So without further ado, just thinking about with the issues that we're facing right now as a state with very high unemployment, even though we've done so well in addressing the coronavirus and keeping our case numbers low and relatively, fewer deaths than many other states, which we're so thankful for the responsiveness of the people of Hawaii and working on that. That doesn't change the fact that we still have a serious health issue that is largely related to our kids. So if you look on the screen, and these are from the Department of Health of Hawaii and their fact sheet. And you're welcome I would recommend going to their website if you'd like more information that is targeted both to educators and parents and some for youth on this issue, is that you see that Hawaii has some of the highest youth vaping rates in the nation, and we have led at different times in the highest rates for middle schoolers in the country. There are a lot of reasons why that could be. Vaping and e-cigarette use arrived in Hawaii earlier than it did in other states. But unlike in other states, we have not seen the same rise in prevalence of a product like Juul. There are lots of different products that are used here, some of which you may not even recognize are in your home because they look like a highlighter or they look like a pen like this. So this is not something that has gone away. We know that it has shifted and there are changes in behavioral use because kids are at home in quarantine with their families and not necessarily vaping in the bathroom at their high school or their middle school. But an addiction is an addiction, and nicotine is an extremely addictive substance. So we know that even if they are at home and not with their peers, they may still be finding ways to get these products because unfortunately they don't necessarily have a choice whether they're going to use it or not. They have an addiction. So this issue, despite the fact that we've all been looking at at a very large health issue with the coronavirus and COVID-19, still remains present and something that we need to be thinking about. Just to illustrate this, I pulled a couple of quotes from some of the neighbor island coordinators from the Hawaii Coalition for Tobacco-Free Hawaii. And I will just read them out loud to you, though I'm sure you can see them on your screen. It says, a lot of people my age and even younger vape. My little sister is addicted to vaping, and it's because of the candied flavored liquids. She's only in the 7th grade. And the next one says, I'd say about 85% of my high school vapes. I hear my classmates talking about new flavors that they look forward to trying. A lot of kids vape in the bathrooms and out of their bags when the teachers are not looking. This is not something that is going to go away because kids are in quarantine. And it is something that we are seeing at younger and younger ages. So I don't think that we can, just as we've shown that as a state that we can respond dramatically when something threatens all of our collective health, this issue remains something that our state needs to step up and respond to so that we can protect the health of our keiki and give them an addiction-free future. So without further ado, I will pass it off to our rock star public health advocate, executive director of the Hawaii Public Health Institute, Jessica Yamauchi, who's been fighting this fight for many years in different roles and capacities. But thank you so much, Jess, and I'll pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about what bills were filed and how the public has responded to that legislation.
Great, thank you so much, Liza. So we wanted to go over first just a little bit of poll data that we have. Every year, the Hawaii Public Health Institute commissions a public opinion poll to gauge public support for some of the issues that we're working on. So the results that we're going to share here is from our 2019 poll that was conducted in October and November of 2019. The poll was conducted by Ward Research. And so here you can see that a majority of those who responded really do think that e-cigarettes are an issue, that they're harmful for our children, teens, and families at 75%, and 87% believe that it is an issue for school-aged kids. Go to the next slide. Do I have the ability to? Oh. So here we have comparing 2018 data and 2019 data. 2018 data is in the yellow and 2019 data is in pink. And you can see that it spiked up just a little bit for more support in 2019 than it did in 2018 when we look at regulation of e-cigarettes. So when we look at regulating e-cigarettes as, or the belief that they are tobacco products, we see that it ticked up just a little bit to 79%. Sorry, let me move my screen here just a little, to 71%. 85% believe that they should be regulated the same way that we regulate combustible tobacco. And 2019 was the first year that we asked the question about prohibiting online sales. And we found that 74% supported prohibiting the sale of e-cigarettes online. So this one is focused on flavored tobacco products, and we saw a huge increase in this from 2018. In 2018, 47% supported prohibiting flavored tobacco, and in 2019 we saw that jump to 64%. And I think a couple of reasons that we really started to see stronger support for all of the regulations around e-cigarettes, there's a couple of reasons I think that factor in here. One is locally there were a lot of public service announcements that were done, a lot of messaging that was going out about the dangers and the harms of e-cigarettes. But also, if you remember, nationally, there was a lot of attention on e-cigarettes and the lung injury that was occurring in young, healthy young adults. So I think a lot of this really played a factor in the support that we're seeing for regulation. Go to the next slide. And so here, 2019 was the first time that we asked in our poll specifically about menthol. So we had asked about flavored in the past, but we wanted to make sure that people understood and to get a pulse on where people were with including menthol in a flavor ban. And we did find that 56% indicated strong support for prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco products, including menthol. And we use this data a lot in our testimony. We try to share it out with our lawmakers so that they understand that there really is a lot of public support for this. So talking about the bills that were filed at the beginning of 2020, which kind of feels like an eternity ago now, we we have 5 different bills that were introduced for flavored tobacco. There were more bills that were introduced also around the regulation of e-cigarettes, but for this webinar, we're just gonna focus on the 5 relating to flavored. So the first 2, they're companion bills, House Bill 2457 and Senate Bill 2538 were Rep. Matayoshi and Senator Baker's bills. I had to kind of refresh my memory, I will say, yesterday when, because it does feel like a lifetime ago. We had all of this in our heads for all of January, February, and part of March. But this bill was pretty comprehensive. It was relating to the youth vaping epidemic. It did prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products, but it also included a few other things in that bill as well, including a safe harbor program for the Department of Health, a confiscation piece for the Department of Education, prohibiting remote sales or online sales, restoring the county ability to actually enact stricter laws around flavored tobacco regulations, and did also have a piece on consequences for youth that were caught, including youth fines and tobacco education. So it was a really comprehensive bill. Senator Baker also introduced a bill that did not have a House companion. That was Senate Bill 2228. This one, the title was relating to flavored products for electronic smoking devices. So it was a little bit more restrictive to just e-cigarettes, but it did include menthol e-cigarettes, and it also addressed online sales. And then the last 2 bills, if we can hit the next slide, were the administration's bills. So these were introduced through the Department of Health, House Bill 2347 and Senate Bill 2903. Also pretty comprehensive. It prohibited the sale of all flavored tobacco products, and also had that anti-preemption or the preemption clause in there that was going to restore county ability to enact stricter laws around flavored tobacco. They had a separate bill that had online sales though, so that was not incorporated into this bill. And so what happened with these bills, again, kind of seems like a lifetime ago, but going to the first 2 bills that we talked about that Representative Matayoshi and Senator Baker introduced, those are the first 2 lines. You'll see that House Bill 2457 actually crossed over to the Senate, passed all of the committees in the House. So we were actually really ecstatic because in the past, the House Finance Committee would normally wait for the Senate bill to cross over and just let the House bills die. So this was monumental for us to have a House bill actually cross over to the Senate. And just before the session went on break, Senator Baker was able to hear this bill in the Senate in the Joint Consumer Protection and Health and Education Committee. And the bill now sits in Judiciary and WAM. And they'll talk a little bit more about where session is now. With the companion bill on the Senate side, it did pass all the committees in the Senate and went over to the House. But then the Health and Lower and Higher Education Committee in the House decided not to hear the bill. I think the main reason really was because the companion House bill had already crossed over to the Senate. So they let the House let that one die. Senator Baker's bill, SB 2228, did pass the 2 committees in the Senate and then crossed over to the House. And it passed the House Consumer Protection Committee committee. And we were scheduled to have a judiciary hearing in the House the day before session went on hold. So we had a hearing notice. I think there was actually a lot of testimony submitted, but unfortunately, with everything that happened, they had to stop session and the hearings were canceled. And then the last 2, again, are the governor's administration package. So the House bill, you'll see, did not get a finance hearing in the House, which indicated that they were throwing their support behind House Bill 2457, which is the bill that they heard. And then for the companion Senate bill, the Senate did hear it and pass it over to the House. But then once again, the Health Committee in the House did not hear the bill, really indicating, I think, that the House was putting all of their support behind House Bill 2457 as the vehicle that they wanted. And I think,
thanks so much, Jess.
yeah.
I wasn't sure if Representative Matayoshi or Senator Baker, if you had anything you wanted to add, just kind of on the progression of those bills or thoughts?
Well, I think the legislature is clearly in support of those measures. We just got caught when the legislature was forced to recess. We were not suspended. We were not dismissed. We just went into recess, and we've come back, and we'll return again in, I think they've sort of settled on June 15th. So I'm hoping that some of these, we can pick them up and run with them.
Yep, I completely agree with Senator Baker. These bills were poised to go through, but then, COVID stopped a lot of things, not just the vaping bills. I know that Senator Baker was holding on to, or just passed a bill through her committee that only had one more joint committee left. And I was actually talking to House leadership on my side that because I couldn't remember what bill went through what committee already. But if that bill had already made it through WHAM and Judd, I was talking to them about having the House just agree to it, just to make it into law and send it to the governor as is, without going to conference. So I think we were in a pretty good place. That being said, I mean, I didn't have a firm commitment from them because it wasn't ready for that stage yet. But just the fact that they were willing to at least talk with me about it and consider it, I think that's very promising. Senator Baker might know more about whether we will be able to hear, or whether WHAM, mainly WHAM, is willing to hear non-budget related bills when we reconvene in June. So if that is the case and WHAM is willing to hear non-budget related bills, I think that this is a good one to push because it doesn't require any money, right? It's a non-fiscal bill that has a lot of public support, that has a lot of legislative support. I think this would be a big win for not only the legislature, but also for Hawaii. If we could get this done, even amidst the COVID pandemic, it'd just be kind of a good thing to show that the legislature is very focused on COVID, but also still working for the people. So I'm hopeful. If it does so happen that we are able to hear other bills, then I'm going to definitely be pushing for this one to be heard in June. But, fingers crossed, we'll see what happens.
Well, I can tell you what the Senate President communicated to the senators. We were asked to provide our top 3 priority House bills, our top 3 priority Senate bills within our committee jurisdiction that did not have appropriations, hopefully to be able to take some of them up when we return to session. So I will tell you that in both the Senate bills and the House bills, my number 1 priority was House Bill 2457, which is the youth vaping epidemic bill. That's Scot's bill. And on the Senate side would be 2227, which is sort of a companion bill, I think. I'd also put on the flavor ban. So because I have a joint committee, it's not really a joint committee, but I have 2 subject matters inside my committee, consumer protection and health. I wrangled out 3 Senate bills that would be health and 3 Senate bills that would be consumer protection and 3 House bills that would be health and 3 House bills that would be consumer protection. So hopefully some of those bills will be agreed to and we'll be able to move them forward when we reconvene in June.
Well, that's really great to hear.
More about that, Senator Baker? I think that sounds, that's really interesting information. And so what does that reconvening in June when, and what would that potentially look like?
Well, we're thinking that it's going to be around the 15th of June. And the reason that Senate President asked us for bills, and I'm feeling that they asked the chairs on the House side the same thing, because I got some House health priorities, is to figure out the ones that are the most important to the chairs of the various committees, and then we will try to move them forward. The caveat was that they can have no money in them, because one of the real reasons we're having to go back is because with tourism off, and I can just look at my district and tell you how bad tourism is right now. It's non-existent. That means that tax collections are down. And so the legislature, particularly the money committees, are tasked with the unenviable chore of trying to cut $1.5 billion at least, maybe more, out of the state budget, and preserving, the best programs that they can and the most that they can. So I'm hoping that because of these bills addressing a real public health emergency, that we will be able to get those through. And, if we can move Scot's bill, I'm all for it. If we default to another bill, that's fine. I just want the issue solved. And, Scott's in such a great representative to work with. So I'm hoping that we can get House Bill 2457 across the finish line.
Oh, likewise.
It had 2 House drafts on it and 1 Senate draft. So I think of the ones that I was looking at, it's probably the furthest along.
Yep, I
Wow,
agree.
that's the most hopeful news I've heard in a long time. Thank you, Senator Baker, for speaking a little hope over us in this time. It also kind of changes how I've been thinking about even the rest of this webinar, because Rep. Matayoshi has the unenviable position now of trying to think about what does the future look like for this type of legislation. Like, if we're not able to move forward in June, which fingers crossed, that would be excellent. How do we keep this at the front of the attention for the legislature when we have, as you'll see in I liked this photo of this little girl trying to cook a very large fish, because I was just, the phrase bigger fish to fry kept coming back into my mind as I was thinking about this issue. Like, our legislators going to come back to us and say, like, don't stop asking me for this. We've got to plug a $1.5 billion hole in the state budget. And so that's why I put that picture up there. But, if that ends up being the case, and we all recently saw the governor's just very new news about not necessarily opening up to tourism at the end of June, but maybe even longer. Rep. Matayoshi, what do you think? How do we keep that at the forefront of the conversation to make sure that our kids' voices are not lost in this time?
Well, I think that a lot of attention is going to be given to economics. Everyone's mind right now is on the budget deficit, on the long-term effect on the economy, the health of the economy. So I think our message really needs to reflect the concerns that are already top of mind for a lot of legislators and a lot of decision makers in our state. And one of the things that I'd like us to emphasize, at least, maybe not focus on, but emphasize, are the long-term health costs and consequences of allowing the youth vaping epidemic to continue. Everyone is kind of looking long-term right now. What is our economy going to look like in the long term? I think we need to refocus them also on what is the health of our people going to look like in the long term, and how much money are we going to be spending in healthcare costs if we addict another generation to nicotine. So I think that it kind of does dovetail. I'm trying to tie this into economics as much as possible, but I think that's really the argument. This bill is going to cost us nothing, so there's no current economic impact. And not only that, but there's a huge long-term impact for our state by banning flavored vaping products. And we could see that effect almost immediately, I want to say, with a reduction in the current vaping-related illnesses that we're seeing. Not that they're necessarily directly related to legal vaping, but banning all flavored vaping will allow the crackdown on illegal vaping, especially flavored illegal vaping, to commence as well. And make that a lot easier for teachers and for police officers and law enforcement officials to crack down on that as well. So I think that it can have an immediate current effect. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure COVID has a pretty drastic effect on lung health as well.
It does.
So I think that's another thing to hit on is like, look, we have this respiratory illness going around, and we're allowing this flavored vaping product out there that's encouraging people to put, this vaping product into their lungs that's shown to have health consequences. So why are we compounding the effect that COVID's having on the health of our population? If we're truly focusing on the health of our population, and we're willing to, go hell and high water to stop our economy completely, to really cripple us and have all these families go through all these hardships, how are we not willing to take the simple step of banning this product that we know has respiratory effects, especially on kids? I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of a no-brainer to me. So bringing that into, I think, is very important. I think we're going to really need to fight the vape shops who are now trying to say that they're small businesses, and the health of our economy along with them needs to be taken, and they need bail. I mean, it's crazy. I think we really need to refocus people and really emphasize that these vape shops are selling something that's going to be costing us more money in the long term, and is just terrible for our kids, who are going to be the ones working in those restaurants, working in those hotels, working in whatever other industries that we managed to diversify our economy into. But we're mortgaging the future right now by hurting the future workers by addicting them all to vaping. So it's another, again, I'm just trying to kind of rephrase this in more economic terms that people are very focused on right now. But I think that's really how we're going to fight right now in the current legislature, in the current climate, to get these bills through. And I know Senator Baker has been doing an amazing job on the Senate side of pushing these bills. Were I a chair of anything, it would be on my list as well. But I'm really glad that Senator Baker is taking the leading role here to try to push this through. And that's great news that that it might still have a chance of passing through this year. Looking forward to working with Senator Baker more and trying to make this happen.
Well, I look forward to
Awesome.
working with you. I think I like the way that you're doing it. I think that's perfect.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I think some of the questions that we've had as we've been thinking about reframing over the session and being in quarantine and with kids being out of school has really been, and I'm already seeing on the question and answer chat a lot of questions from advocates about how to move forward, and we'll talk about some of that, and then once we get to this portion, we'll start asking you all some of those questions too. But the things that we have been thinking about in particular are really about reaching parents during this time. We have asked them to come forward to share their stories, to advocate for their kids during this time. And we've felt as a campaign that it's really our role to step in and say, hey, how can we help you now? With the legislature in recess, there wasn't much that they could do as far, as pushing legislatively, but that didn't mean that they weren't still at home now with their kids full time and maybe seeing behaviors that they had never seen before, maybe watching a kid go through nicotine withdrawal. So we've been focusing on reaching out to those parents and making sure that they have the resources that they need to have the right conversations with their kids about this product in a way that's going to get them to open up and share something that could be really difficult. We also always want to make sure that we are taking, a mental health positive approach and not shaming kids out of a behavior that they have been coerced into by multi-billion-dollar companies, but letting them know that we're there for them. So we've been talking to parents, working with other experts and other coalitions to figure out how we can craft the right type of messaging for them. And we'll be continuing to push that over the summer and hopefully bringing together more parents to share their stories, but also to get their resources as we look at a really, different schooling situation. Maybe it might be that we go, kids go back to school, but they're in school for a week and then they're home for a week. And so what we've all experienced is that we're all getting to see each other in our households just a lot more. We now know, what your partner sounds like when they're on a work call. You know what your kid looks like when they have to go through a lesson. We've all experienced that a lot more. We want to make sure our parents feel supported in that. To that end, we want to make sure that cessation resources, that we keep pushing on those issues, that we're, we don't just say that we're content with the fact that, we don't have a lot of resources for youth on cessation, but we keep asking ourselves and pushing ourselves as advocates and with the Department of Health and at a national level to say we need to be getting real tools that really work for our kids, not just in prevention, but helping them quit. To that end, we are also looking, thank you, Rep. Matayoshi, for bringing this up, at the issue of COVID and vaping and e-cigarette use. We're really deeply concerned. So far, we've had less children and teens that have been impacted by COVID-19, but we did see an incident where a young man who was in high school, his dad was actually an emergency medicine doctor and was thought that his son had contracted COVID-19, took him to the hospital, and it turns out he actually was having a case of EVALI instead. And so they had to change how they were treating him. And so, if we all remember that, last summer we were freaking out about the many hundreds of people who were hospitalized with mysterious lung disease. And those issues are still happening, and those are comorbidities that we need to understand more about. We especially want to make sure that if kids do go back to school, this is a product that is often shared between a number of kids at a time, and passed around a classroom. We definitely don't want them doing that right now. So we need to keep hitting that public health messaging on that, keeping your kids safe from COVID-19 is also making sure that you're addressing any type of e-cigarette use that they might have. And then lastly, I think you were right on, both of you, the senator and representative. We don't just believe, we know that this will save the state money, and not just in future healthcare costs, but potentially in a tax on e-cigarettes. So those are some of the core areas that the campaign has identified. Those of you who are on this webinar, who are part of our campaign, and see anything that you want to be involved in any of those areas, feel free to reach out to us and say, hey, yeah, I absolutely want to stand with you in talking to parents, and I have parents that would love to be a part of something like that. Just let us know. We want to talk to those people. So that's just to let you know where we are with the campaign and what we're thinking there, but it's open to change, though I think we have some sense of what the future may look like. That sounds like, it feels like a lot of hubris to say anything that you know about anything in the future these days. But with that, I'm going to switch over to some questions so some questions that we've received in the chat box. And so some of the things that have come up so far are really, maybe for you, Senator Baker, if we have a shot at this potentially in June, what do you need from us as advocates and members of the campaign, supporters, to support your work in pushing this forward?
Well, I think once we know that it's going to be on the agenda, then it would be making sure that all of the advocates can contact their representative, their senator, to let them know that this is an important piece of legislation and that it should be supported. Since we're not really certain exactly how many bills are going to come up and what the rules of the game are going to be when we get back into session, I think it might be premature to start communicating with legislators now, unless it's your own individual legislator. Then I think, saying to them that you hope when the legislature reconvenes in June, that they would take up some of these issues. But I think now might be more of a softer sell than if we actually get back and can say this is going to be on our agenda. Representative Matayoshi, what do you think? You're muted.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, honestly, I guess I'm kind of out of the loop because since I'm not a committee chair, but I didn't even realize it was still alive. So all my notes are focused on, what are we going to do next year? So yeah, I mean, I'm going to just follow Senator Baker's lead on this.
To that end, one of the questions that I received are there any potential challenges or roadblocks that we should consider with bills. I think Representative, you pointed to some issues with the vape shops and the question of small businesses and not wanting to harm any more small businesses. I think we've also recognized that, though, you know, we will say that there were times when members of the campaign who are on outer islands or on neighbor islands noticed that those vape shops were not always acting in good faith or putting the best interests of their consumers first and operating outside the bounds of the guidelines that were prescribed by their mayors and by the governor. And so, but now many of them are been allowed to reopen. So do you see anything aside from obviously the legislature being mostly focused on money and how to get our economy back up while maintaining public health and safety, and the vape shops, are there any other potential challenges or roadblocks that you think we should be aware of as a company? None at all. We're just going to be easy sailing. I love it. On to victory from here. Senator Baker, do you think there's anything that we should be thinking about as far as challenges or roadblocks that might come up?
Well, I think the advocates just need to be able to move and mobilize quickly. There's still a lot of uncertainty about how long we're going to be. The House and the Senate have to do all of this in tandem. And so all of the rules and all of the schedules have to be negotiated, might be a little too strong a word, but they have to be agreed upon together. So I think it's just, if you know a legislator, if you can pick up the phone with one, you might want to say, if the possibility exists, we'd really like to see this measure move forward to the end. I think that's the kind of communication that would be helpful and not a real hard sell, because none of us really know exactly how the schedule is going to go. We know we've got to come back. We know there's some things that we have to pass. And we've positioned some of those things, but we're going to be looking at some other bills. So maybe communicating with your own legislator and not doing the broad brush right now might be the best approach.
And if I could add, a personalized message means a lot more than random, than just like the set copy paste generic mass email. I mean, those they don't carry as much weight with me, and probably with a lot of others. The effort that people put in really tells us how much they actually care about an issue. So if your effort is doing one mouse click and sending an email that someone else wrote for you, that shows me you don't care as much as someone who really reached out and gave their story or made a personal appeal to their legislator to hear this bill if possible. So if you are going to reach out, I would encourage you not to do it in a generic email that you just kind of replace your name at the bottom. I would really encourage you to reach out with a phone call or a personalized email, just so that we know that you really care about the issue enough to spend a couple of minutes typing us something that you care about. Yeah.
That's a really good note. I have another question here that's a little bit more technical. So Jess, you may also be able to answer this, or one of the legislators, but the question is there a realistic threat to the special funds going to tobacco control either this year or next? I think we're all watching money and making sure it doesn't come out of the things that we want it to be in. Any thoughts on that?
I actually don't think so. The legislature put the federal COVID funds into the rainy day fund. Not that it's going to stay there, because most of those funds have to be spent by the end of the year. But I think the idea was the legislature wants to see what the administration's plans are, and to make sure that those funds are going to be used specifically for things that have been impacted by COVID-19. So I anticipate that that's going to be a lot of the discussion and how those monies are appropriated, because like I said, they'll have to be used by the end of the end of this calendar year, and if not, then they revert back to the feds. And none of us want to give money back.
Indeed.
I would just say
Jessica,
that, yeah, I mean, I'll just say that as advocates, we're definitely watching and making sure that those funds are used for the intended purpose. And, you know, I think going back to what I think a couple other, what Representative Matayoshi and Senator Baker were saying, the more we can also link COVID-19 to some of these issues and potential impacts from vaping and cigarette smoking as well. I think the stronger the argument that that funding needs to continue to go towards tobacco prevention and cessation. So I know our Department of Health has been working on that messaging, but I think that that's going to be, because it's just what's top of mind, it's going to be critical to really talk about the prevention efforts that are needed for the long-term benefit.
Yeah, I would be a little careful. I know that we're tapping a lot of special funds, and I'm not speaking for the money chairs here because I'm certainly not one of them. But we're looking at a lot of different special funds where the money was set aside for a specific purpose, but you know, the general overriding need now is so heavy that we're looking at any money that's laying around that we can get. So I want to just caution us about raising a fuss over taking money from this or that special fund, even if we don't necessarily agree with it. I don't want to make an enemy of the money chairs because they've got a tough job. You know, they've got to find the money that they need to keep this economy and state going, and giving them a lot of hassle over taking money from the tobacco fund when they're taking money from every fund is just going to make them unnecessarily angry at us. I mean, they got to do what they got to do. And if you want to, you know, say, hey, you know, we are keeping an eye on it. We just wanted to note that money was being, you know, supposed to be spent on this, and we hope it can be made up later. That's one thing. But I don't want us to publicly shame them or make a big stink publicly about it. We just don't need that. That's going to ensure that this bill dies, that our flavor ban bill dies. So just kind of a food for thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with the representative. We need all of the friends and allies that we can get. And you just look at, all I have to do is go look at Lahaina and Kanapali and Wailea to tell you how bad tourism is. And our major driver in terms of resources comes from the general excise tax and the transient accommodations tax. And our residents are not spending a lot right now, but the major folks that we get general excise tax from are the visitors, and we just don't have very many of them. So, you know, we have an opportunity to get some federal help, but some of that federal help comes with strings, which means it has to be paid back. And some of it has to be paid back within a year. And so if we think that our economy is not going to be coming out of the woods for more than a year, we have to be very, very cautious. You know, you don't want to have to do things like furloughing. You don't want to have to do things like cutting major programs. So it's going to take a lot of people working together and trying to figure out how they can minimize the impacts that may be felt. But I don't know that anything is necessarily sacrosanct at the moment, because we just don't know where we're going to end up, and the hole is very big.
Yes. I think we've all felt that, or if we've been following the news, I think it is ominously large. So I had a couple more questions on here, but I think we'll be able to wrap up a little bit before the hour. So I'll read this one out because I feel like this person took some time to craft it. Says, as always, the devil is in the details of bills. If one of the flavored tobacco bills is considered in June, do we think that there will be agreement to make it comprehensively inclusive of all tobacco flavors, including menthol? And can there be agreement that the focus should be on industry regulation and not on penalizing kids falling into the industry's addiction traps. So I think there's a question about the comprehensiveness. You know, is there something, or we'll be able to get kind of our Cadillac bill, or is it going to be something a little bit tighter, and then we'll have to come back later for more?
I could speak to that a little bit, because the problem most advocates have had is with the provision in my bill that I put in. Honestly, I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. It was to get it through Finance Committee, which has never really happened with previous bills, because it's a tough committee to get through. But in talks with the finance chair, that was one of the things that she wanted in there to get it through that committee. So I put it in to get it through. I don't necessarily agree with that provision, but if that's the price we had to pay to ban flavored vaping, that was a price I was willing to pay, just flat out. That was the price to get it over to the Senate, and I'm thankful that Senator Baker now has had a chance to amend the bill. So I don't think that the current version of the bill has that language in there, but it's been a while, and Senator Baker can correct me if I'm misremembering. But if the bill is going to go to conference committee, it's going to need to be there's going to need to be some kind of compromise position taken on that provision. So I don't want that provision to kill the overall good that a flavored ban can have. And when we come out really hard against a provision that I know the finance chair wants in the bill on the House side, it makes it, I want to say, impossible to get this thing through on the House side. So I just want everyone to have a realistic expectation of what's going to happen with that provision, and know that, you know, in politics, a lot of things are compromise and a lot of things are give and take. And that is something that I think our side is going to have to give in order to take the vastly larger victory of banning flavored tobacco products in the state. You know, through conference committee, I know Senator Baker is going to give that push to the pull, and hopefully we'll end up somewhere in the middle. But if that's something that the finance chair has her heart and mindset on, I don't think it's going to be going away. It's possible that with all this COVID thing, you know, she'll have forgotten about it, and maybe I can convince her that it's not a big deal, but it kind of is what it is at this point, especially if we're going to push it through this year, and it's going to require, you know, maybe just a straight agreement from the House on the House side. I think that we're going to need to just be realistic about that provision and keep our eye on the ball on the bigger price.
Well, the other thing I would just add is I believe that we're looking at bills that there can be agreement on without going to conference, because I don't believe that conference is in the minds of any of our leadership. At least that's been my impression. So some of these, you know, the chairs are going to need to try to work it out and then get leadership's buy-in so that we don't have to go to conference. Some of the bills, I think, have defective dates, and those should be the easiest ones to work out. But if there's some big policy disagreements, this particular special, well, it's not really a special session, but this prolonged continuation of the original session may not be the time to try to do that. So I think we need to be mindful of the constraints that we're under, because all of this is, you know, every bill still has to have 3 readings, and we've got to go through the constitutional requirements. But I think people are not going to want to stay in session for another 60 days. Let me just put it that way.
Thank you both for your candid responses on that. I know that it's not always easy to talk about the compromises that need to be made, but thank you for sharing honestly. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up here. And that is, if we make personal appeals to our legislators, which legislators have the most weight in the decision-making process to see this bill heard?
Leadership. That would be this House Speaker and the Senate President. And I think the money chairs would probably be in that leadership structure as well.
Okay.
I also want to add that I think in the Senate, it's a joint WAM-JUD committee that it needs to be heard in. So I think the Judiciary Chair too is going to have
Exactly.
some influence on whether this thing gets through the final committee in the Senate.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being on this call. I think that I'll probably get some more questions later. If between the rest of us we can't answer them ourselves, we'll pass them on to the representative and senator to help us understand a little bit better. But on behalf of Flavor Soaks Hawaii campaign, we so appreciate you taking this time out of your schedule to be here with us. To illuminate this sometimes, and especially in this period, sometimes confusing session, one that has never happened before and hopefully will never happen again. We so appreciate how you've been fighting for these bills for us and fighting for our keiki and fighting for an addiction-free future for them. And whether it's in June or session 2021, we are hopeful that we will yet have success on this issue and be able to have a victory and end the sale of flavored tobacco products. Thank you again so much for your time, everyone. And we look forward to seeing everybody in person, 6 feet away.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.